everyone. You're watching We Heart Therapy, the special series EFT Talk. I'm your host, Dr. Anabelle Bugatti, licensed marriage and family therapist here in fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. And I'm a certified, ISAF certified EFT supervisor and therapist as well. And I recently published an EFT book on relentless empathy. Hopefully you guys will find that on Amazon. And I'm super excited to welcome back to our show. We have our EFT trainer who is in the UK, and her name is Helene Igwebuike. And she is one of the founders of the British Center for EFT. And we did a previous episode with Helena discussing seating attachment. So make sure that you go back and watch that video if you haven't caught it already. And today we are actually going to be talking about EFIT, so using EFT, the model and methods adapted for individual issues, and particularly how to use EFT to help clients that are getting over the loss of a relationship or a breakup. And so we're super excited, Helena, to have you back on our show. Thank you again so much for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me back. It's an honor to be invited back.
And I love your accent. You could recite the alphabet and I would be enamored. We'll just have you recite the EFT steps and stages. We'll be like, oh, that sounds so interesting.
Oh.
So let's talk a little bit about EFIT before we jump into the particulars about how we can use this to help clients who are going through a breakup. But so for somebody who, you know, maybe not be aware of how they're different or the fact that they're really the same, but it just kind of adapted a little bit differently. Can you kind of give maybe an overview as to EFIT and how it's the same and different?
Yeah, I mean, EFIT is the same in the sense as EFT because it's all about creating corrective emotional experiences, really helping people shift their emotional experience. And with couples, for instance, and families, you've got the attachment figures in the room. And we're just really trying to help them open up, share their emotional experience, have it be heard, have it be received. And that creates that corrective emotional experience that helps shift things. With individuals, you don't have the attachment figures or the others in the room, but you have them in the room as imagined others. Because of course we take the people that are dear to us or the people that have an impact on our lives with us everywhere we go. They reside inside us. And so with EFIT, we're using the same skills, we're using the same interventions, we're using the same, the tango, but it's slightly
still EFT after all.
Yeah, it's EFT. It's still EFT in the sense that you're still trying to help people have these corrective emotional experiences. I suppose specifically where it really changes is in Tango Move 3, right? Where you would have with a couple or a family, you have those people in the room, you can help them turn and engage with each other. In EFIT, it's more the imagined encounter with maybe, you know, an attachment figure, an important attachment figure, somebody that's injured them. They don't have to be important. It could be you, most importantly, the encounter with you, the therapist. But that's an experience. That in itself is also a corrective experience because you're accompanying them in the emotional experience. You're helping them access it, expand it, share it with you, really encounter themselves in a different way by virtue of having you be with them. And of course, we also have encounters with parts of self, with the adult self to the child self. But because EFT is grounded in an attachment theory, it's the interpersonal encounters that are really meaningful, helping people be able to share and say what they're unable to say to the other person. That in itself is corrective, whether the person is in the room or not.
Yeah. So I love what you're saying. And a lot of this is just straight out of attachment science about how we have these internal working models, is what we say, like replicas of our attachment figures. And we carry them in our hearts, we carry them in our minds. You know, I've had frontline workers who have told me, you know, when they, you know, maybe they're in the fire department or the police department, when they get a really bad call, I asked them, how do you help yourself calm down, come to a safe place? One of them said, I think of my wife and my baby, and that helps me calm and soothe and come back to myself after a really big call. So that's just an
Wow.
example of how they're kind of
That's a
replicated.
beautiful example of what we're talking about, right? That just
Yeah,
because the person isn't there doesn't mean you don't carry them in your heart, right? They're there.
right, right.
Yes.
And that we can access the emotional memory of, that positive, loving relationship with them to help us soothe. And here's where it can get sticky is, and you mentioned this is in EFIT. So it's EFT for individuals. So it's still EFT, but it's just adapted, obviously, because you only have one half in the room. And sometimes I find individual work can be really frustrating because if they are coming in for something relational and you can't get the other partner in, you kind of come up against a wall eventually, which can be really hard if somebody wants to stay in the relationship, but their partner refuses to do the work. So that can be really hard. But also, so that kind of is a good leeway into our subject today is when a client is going through the loss of an attachment relationship, like, let's say that they're going through a breakup and it will never be possible to have the other partner in the session. And as we know that there's really not anything that EFT cannot help anybody with. And so, when we have clients that come to us that, maybe they've chosen to end their relationship or somebody else has chosen, it's still very important to help these clients do the emotional work so that they can heal in a healthy way and not carry that baggage on to other relationships. So as you were talking about, we might set up encounters with attachment figures that aren't theirs, like a replication imagined. I can imagine that could be very helpful, when they're going back and trying to maybe work towards the things that they wish they could have said in the close of the relationship, having them do an encounter with the imagined other partner could be very healing.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking, right, the first thing is, if you like, move one in EFIT, right? Whether it's EFIT or EFCT, emotionally focused couple therapy, is help them just really fully meet them where they are. Really help them fully arrive at where they are. And that when relationships end like that, there can be a lot of anger, there can be shame, there can be unbearable grief, right?
Yes.
Loss, the trauma of the losing someone so important, and us being able to fully meet them there. Help them fully arrive at that emotion, help them assemble their affect around it. How are they getting stuck? How are they getting stuck? Are they becoming avoidant about it? What strategy are they using to deal with this? Are they getting stuck in avoidance? I don't need him or I don't need her anyway. Are they getting completely anxious and ruminating and beating up on themselves and shaming themselves? Help them really get in touch with what they're feeling, how they're dealing with it.
Yeah. Which is so important. As you're saying this, I'm thinking of step 2 of stage 1, which would be their cycle. And so kind of like mapping out their cycle, obviously the tango is a part of this, is helping them start to organize and make sense of the end of the relationship, their emotional reactions and their moves in that place. When this grief comes up or when this anger comes up, what do you do, right?
Yes.
And sometimes this could be, I reach out and I, maybe I'll go and I'll get drinks with the girls or my guy friends, and then I start drunk texting my ex-spouse, my ex-partner,
stalking them on Facebook, LinkedIn, just helping them really own what they're doing with their emotions, right? Help them get in touch with it. And people are not necessarily gonna go there by themselves. We develop these strategies for good reasons, right? To keep our emotions at a safe distance, whether you're hypo or whether you're hyper aroused.
So it's still under or really over, like Yeah.
You're still not there where the experience is. So just really helping them go to that experience and look at how they bring it into conscious awareness, how they're actually dealing with that.
And do they have anyone safe, like any other safe attachment figures in the moments when their pain is at the highest, and it's obviously it's in between session, they can't reach to you all the time. Is there somebody safe that they can talk to and share their grief, who will listen, who might comfort them? You know, do they have safe attachment figures that they don't turn to? And so that might be curious. What role might that have played in the relationship of maybe turning away from an attachment figure, or maybe there's not anyone safe, and so again that leaves them feeling very alone and can compound the grief and the aloneness that they feel, you know,
Or
kind
the
of like,
anger, right? Like
yeah.
if the anger is around, like the beauty of the tango is that first move is meet people where they are with what's most alive. If it's the anger, if it's the protest anger, right? Like help people express it. And that's the interpersonal encounter. They can have an encounter. How could you leave me? How could you do that? Why did, like, really just have them express where they are.
Yeah. And I think organizing, the power of move one
Mm-hmm.
is just so important no matter what client you're seeing, because it really helps you help them make sense out of what's happening, out of what they're feeling, out of what's going on in the relationship, and organizing it can help them feel like, oh, okay, now I have some semblance, and it can actually have a calming effect, even if we are we're bringing them into that emotion and working with that live emotion. It still can help them feel a little more grounded.
Yeah, we're helping them tolerate that emotion that they're having, right?
Yeah.
And being with them there, not tolerating it with them, because often when you're going through a loss like that, you kind of like, it's almost like you run out of the opportunity to be able to talk about it. People can only hear so much, right? But we are actually helping them tolerate and express and be with the pain, be with the agony, be with all those emotions around it, and
Yeah.
then enable them to say what was not said, what they need to say to that person,
So
and
this
imagine the
right here,
response. Hmm?
yeah, this right here brings up kind of a lot. So a really important thing, which I've told a lot of my supervisees, is it feels like EFT is a lot like emotionally exposure therapy. And the stimulus that we're exposing our client to is the act of feeling their emotions and
Yes.
helping them get that tolerance and not run away from the emotions. And it's so important to help clients do that, because that's what will help them build healthier coping strategies, is when they can tolerate that emotion and have some more agency and choice over how they express it. But something that I've heard clients say is, you know, kind of what's the difference between having them feel that emotion and kind of getting stuck there stewing in it. They kind of think, what's the point of sitting in that emotion when it's so painful? I'm just alone there. Why not just avoid it and, you know, not think about it or keep myself busy? What would you say in that place?
Well, I would say, like you cannot leave the station until you arrive at the station, right? Like you have to fully arrive at what you're feeling. And often what happens is when we are not, well, this is the beauty of attachment theory, like when we're not accompanied in a very difficult experience, we don't fully get there, right? That's why those attachment strategies, bless them, are deployed, right? Because it's so unbearable. You do something that actually means you don't fully arrive at it. You don't fully get there. And the only way really, and I relate to this from my own experience of, for instance, going through a divorce, right? That you get stuck at one level. You kind of get stuck at the anger, you get stuck at the shame, and it's hard to get to the core experience, the core shame, the core fear, right? I'm not lovable. No one will ever love me again. I'm unworthy. I'm a failure. Like really help someone arrive at the core of it. Because, move two of the tango is you assemble their affect, what people say to themselves, the meaning they make out of this loss, right? What they do with it. But also what we really are also trying to help people do is really stay where they are so that it deepens. So we get to what is the core of it. What's
Yeah.
at the heart of it, right? And
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 that's
what I would be saying is you can't get past it until you get into it.
right. That's so true. Allowing themselves to deeply feel it, often when they avoid it, it's still because we know emotions live in the body and pain demands
Mm,
to be felt. And we don't
mhm,
feel it, it comes out in some other way. I've had a lot of clients who come in and they're like, I tried to deal with this on my own. I would just push it down because I had to go to work or I had to do this and I wouldn't let myself
mm,
cry. And then
mm,
suddenly, I'm at the grocery store and somebody just pushed into me and I lost it and I screamed and yelled at them, or they're saying like
mm,
they lose it in these other ways because again it's all that emotion that they've not dealt with.
mm.
And there's also information contained in emotion that we don't have access to from just the logic part of our brain. So
Absolutely.
I know people try to kind of keep that distance, but there's so much information contained there that most of the time, even my clients, once we get there, they're like, oh, more information becomes available that's only
Mm.
available in the emotional space.
And that's that reprocessing of the experience, right? That is
Mhm.
what, that's what it does then. It's almost like it's organized, it's made sense of, it's shaped in a different way.
Yeah. And I
Mm.
always tell my clients, if you don't deal with the emotion, it will deal with you. And if you try to
Okay.
move on, yeah, if you try to move on too fast or you haven't dealt with the anger, it comes up in new relationships. And, I think, when there's statistics about remarriage and stuff, a lot of it is because I think people haven't really done the work getting out
Mhm.
of a relationship and figuring out their pattern and really taking time to
Mm,
heal. And moving
mm,
on can be such a temptation, like a band-aid to help get over the pain of the loss of another, but they end up
mm,
bringing the same emotional baggage or
mm.
their own same process into that. And they could be repeating a pattern that needs to be broken that may not be healthy and not even knowing it without doing that work. So
And
it's so
that's where,
helpful.
yeah, and that's where it's helpful, isn't it? Because then when you really help people look at how they deal with their own emotions, how they own it, that strategy then comes into conscious awareness. And there is an opportunity, if you like, to make a different choice, to update that strategy,
Yeah.
right?
And
And
sometimes those strategies aren't just, maybe I would just lose my cool a lot in the relationship. I've had a lot of clients who would avoid, and they would kind of, one of the ways they would avoid is going into people pleaser mode, and they would end up, this idea of not being lovable or not being good enough went so much deeper than just the breakup. And that became a part of
Mhm,
their cycle in the relationship, is that they would end up putting up with things that weren't healthy, not advocating for themselves or advocating for
mm,
safety, and ending up getting really hurt in the relationship and having this be reoccurring not only in romantic relationships but friendships, where they would just have people kind of dump on them. And
mhm.
because they never felt like they had the voice, like I could speak up and say this really hurts me or I'm not okay with that, and really believe that people would love them enough to listen and respect them in that place.
Right. Yeah. So you're helping them actually look at what they're doing that hasn't been working for them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really kind of like going through the anatomy of relationships and tracking their cycle within relationships and in between relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And really understanding how do you go about meeting your partners. Sometimes I've had people who met a lot of partners in bars or nightclubs. So I'm in Vegas, so it's quite
Mm-hmm.
normal. And so kind of discussing, the
Mm-hmm.
pros and cons of those environments, and
Mm-hmm.
how that may lead to, meeting somebody under the condition where there's alcohol involved, and then kind of
Mm-hmm.
assuming that things might be different outside of that environment, and,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of addiction here. But really, part of that grief, I really love that power of move one of the tango is just helping them organize, helping them organize the immediate pain
Mm-hmm.
that they're in and how they're coping with it, how they might get stuck, helping them
Yeah.
organize and feel those emotions. And also, as that immediate pain starts to lift throughout our work, helping kind of dig through the anatomy of the relationship and going through their cycle with how they dealt with emotions in the relationship and in between relationships. So helping them like, oh, here's this common pattern, because maybe I feel like I've chosen the same person over and over, even though I thought I was choosing different, but they ended up being very similar, and finding out that didn't work. So really learning how people deal with emotions, I think just brings so much information, right? If they go into some avoidance mode or some, an anxious mode, the behaviors that manifest out of that.
Yeah, and I was thinking also, bringing it back to what you said, you would like us to really focus in on is like, in terms of dealing with, relationship breakups, heartbreaks, right? The trap we could fall into is to want to make them feel better, right? And it's not about how you get over a broken heart. It's about how you be with a broken heart.
Yeah.
It's about, allowing and making room, permission to actually really be with that broken heart, not get over it, when just really help people be with it and see and help them unearth what it's bringing up for them. Because what often, as you know, when a breakup does is, it kind of unearths your internal working models.
Yes, very much. Those parts of us where we turn on ourselves and say how I'm not lovable, I'm no good, how could this happen? And those can be very painful and trigger so many coping strategies out of that place, right? What it is that we tell ourselves, the meaning we make out of it.
And also what we tell ourselves about relationships and about people. So it's almost like it can confirm our worst fears.
Yeah.
About people can't be trusted.
Right. See, I should never get married because marriage sucks.
Yes.
I always tell people it's not marriage that's broken. It's broken people entering into marriage, expecting marriage to be like this magic umbrella that suddenly, covers all sins, and we don't have to work on it or do anything differently. We just, somehow it's like a magic button. When I selected marriage, how come everything's that glorious?
Right. And so it's like what is being revealed or what's being brought to the surface is the beliefs and the fears we have related to how we see ourselves, how we see other people. And where it really comes alive is, in attachment relationships when they get broken. Because after attachment is the longing to connect and the fear of losing that connection. And when that connection is lost, that's what comes alive. And then we actually help people do that. And I really just really see where move 3 comes in really powerful there. Like if you can really encounter your grief or your anger or your shame or your longing to have the person back and be able to just in imagination, at least, not in reality, even in imagination, be able to share it directly. That in itself is a corrective experience, right? And so that's what's hard to do on your own. And that's where, well, talking about attachment security, even having the therapist be there to be able to share that with, right? Not to be alone with that attachment struggle, not to be alone with that pain. That in itself is, again, a corrective emotional experience.
Yeah. So we could kind of process, what is this like to say this out loud, to share this pain with me, to have me witness this, just to be here with you in this place. And I really, something you said too that struck me as important was, that corrective emotional experience where they could be kind of interacting with the imaginary ex-partner is, when I'm processing, sometimes I'll ask them, how would you imagine they might respond to this? And oftentimes they could say, they might not have responded very well. And so kind of processing, I find that can be very powerful in a way that it can bring about acceptance, that it's like helping them to see, I've had a partner who hasn't been a part of creating safety perhaps as much as I might have tried. And so now that instead of making excuses for them, like I might have in the past. Now, you know, helping them really sit in that place and kind of honor their own voice and feel safe and secure to start taking risks there, to say, okay, no, that's not okay. And actually maybe this isn't so bad, because maybe now I am in a safer place, that I've, you know, don't have a partner who's like purposefully hurting me, or, you know, whatever. You know, sometimes that piece can just elicit a lot about the relationship that can help us work on, again, more of their view of self and how they've learned to cope in these places and make meaning, and what would they like to say if they felt more secure about who they are, you know, based on if that really is the truth, right? If that really is how their partner might have taken it, what do you want to do on those terms? What decisions would you make? And do you feel secure enough in you to honor your voice, which a lot of times clients would say no. And maybe that's how I've ended up staying in relationships past their expiration, or I accept partners in my life that I've known from the start were unhealthy, that weren't a good fit, but I, you know, maybe it was like, maybe I'll be good enough if I can change them with my love, or, you know, all kinds of traps that we can work ourselves into in relationships.
Right. So you're sort of helping them see that, and again, become consciously aware of that. And heightening that for them, so that it's really like, okay, this is what I do. Because the empowering thing in all of this is helping people be aware of what they do, what they tell themselves, and really own it as their own experience. When you can really own your own experience and say, this is what I feel, this is what I do, this is how I cope, that's what's empowering. It's not out there, it's in here, it's happening in here.
And I find it's, especially in breakups, it's been, at least the clients that I work with, and this has been near and dear to my heart, because I myself have gone through divorce, actually twice. And there is, especially as a therapist, there feels like even more shame, because it's like, hey, you're a therapist, but again, I can't, I'm not the great puppet master that can control a partner either, you know. So you know, it's hard, but you know, it really does bring up a lot of view of self, a lot of shame. And I find often a lot of people go to this dark place where they wonder, will I ever be loved again? Will I be judged? And it's quite normal to feel
it's
that
normal way. It's normal, and we can validate right where they are. You ask yourself, will I ever be loved again? And I also hear the longing to one day feel safe enough to find someone again to share my life with. Like, we can hold and validate where they are, the fear where they are, and still hold on to and validate and seed that longing to be able to trust again, to meet someone again. Like you said, you've been through 2 divorces. Like, the longing is there, it's still there, right? And you can hold people where they are, yes, and still hold the longing, so that doesn't become the casualty of the divorce or the loss or the heartbreak, right?
And it's hard, you know. The biggest lesson I learned is to actually, again, notice your pattern, and you know, not wanting divorce is painful, even when it's right, you know, and I wouldn't wish it on anybody. And I fight for relationships every day. And sometimes, you know, they lose. Sometimes the clients choose to end things, and sometimes that is the right decision, but it's still painful regardless. And, you know, just again, a lot of clients, you know, they can really relate to that sense of judgment that they're worried about. You know, I kind of feel like, you know, with relating my own experience and some of my clients, it's like I wear the scarlet letter D that says divorce, you know, and nobody will love me. And this is again where because we know that emotions live in the body and it activates our fight or flight responses. And so this can come out in very interesting ways. When I worry that I won't be loved, or that, you know, I'm too old, I'm not going to find a good partner, you know, What is your strategy there? A lot of times if they hyperactivate, they'll just start getting right back into dating. They'll go out with anybody. And again,
A rebound,
yes, they can end up getting themselves back into trouble again because they're not really
Mm-hmm.
ready. They're not looking for a partner out of a healthy place. So they don't have a healthy set of eyes or a healthy emotional state to be accurately assessing the health of another partner. Or they go completely avoid it and like, I'm never going to get married again. I'm just going to be single for the rest of my life.
Oh no, you're talking about me. Yes, so you're sort of talking about the different ways that it can play out. And again, I think that's where I love the model, right? Like that whatever people do makes sense.
Yeah.
Whatever strategy, wherever you are, makes sense, given the elements of emotion you're dealing with, given the meaning you're making out of the situation, given the strategy you're using to deal with it. Like, wherever people are makes sense, and we can hold and validate them there while still seeding the possibility of something different, of being able to trust again, of learning, if you like, how to regulate the emotions and the anxiety in a different way. It's so hard, I think, as well for us as EFT therapists, because we have this beautiful model and we're fighting, like you said, we're fighting for relationships every day. And yet sometimes, close to home, our relationships fail, right? And that's, I think, even harder as a therapist, right? You're trying to save relationships and then you're struggling in relationships. And I think, just really being able to validate, hold people how they cope allows us to go a little bit deeper into our own experience, encounter our own experience in a different way, encounter parts of ourselves in a different way. Yeah.
And I think some of the shame that I love what you're saying, some of the shame that I've noticed can come up for people in this way also is the shame that they feel over leaving a relationship, how, making a choice to get out can maybe violate, maybe their religious values or cultural values. Like, we don't believe in divorce. I feel like somebody won't see me as really having a good relationship ethic because I chose to end it. So helping them walk through that shame and process, what was happening that led them to such a dark and painful place, that this was the best option that they had, and normalizing that. And again, helping them to make sense and be in those emotions. And it is so, how we deal with emotions is just so important, because again, there's always a behavior attached to how we do emotions, even when we're trying not to do emotions. And the act of numbing out. And I tell clients, like, this is a lot of my clients that, especially the ladies, I notice that keep picking the same partner, a lot of them do have numbing strategies. And so what happens is when they numb, they turn off that feeling in their gut that is there for our survival, that's supposed to light up when somebody not healthy is there. When you're dating them, those alarm bells that are supposed to say, maybe check into this, maybe this isn't so good, but they turn it down, they turn it off, they override it. And then they end up ignoring things that are really important, that are really hurtful or potentially really big problems. And so I found that, that's really important, is helping them to trust their gut, to tune back into those signals and not numb it out, because that's their guidepost, right? When they're dating somebody, if they don't want to go through this pain again, how to help them get back on the horse and make healthy decisions. And part of that, again, is how do I do emotions? When I see someone in front of me that I'm getting a red flag, do I allow myself to pay attention to it? Do I investigate it? Do I see myself as worthy enough that if I say no, again, another one will come along the way? Or is it, oh, well, this is probably the best there is, so even though this is like really bad, I'm just gonna, everything else is good, so I'm gonna ignore it, right? And shut it down, not even address it. There's all these ways that these cycles, the emotions play out and affect not only present coping, but again, how they go through the moving on process. And
so what you're describing there beautifully, Anabelle, is how you can help a person actually begin to learn to trust their own experience, right? That things don't just happen to us. They happen through us. They happen through what we tell ourselves, how we sort of, people will say, I saw the red flags, but I just kind of like you said, turned it off, right? So just really, in a non-judgmental, descriptive way, we hold up the mirror. Well, that's move one. Back to move one again. Just hold up the mirror, help people see how they get them, how they do what they do, right?
Yeah.
Right. And that is, so again, so empowering. Maybe what you do isn't really helpful, but knowing what you do, knowing what you do is empowering, even if what you do isn't empowering.
Right. Right. Because once you start to notice it and pay attention to it, then you start to have more agency over it, especially
You have flexibility, you have choice. And that's what that whole first move of the EFIT, the tango, is just bringing conscious awareness to, so you sort of see the red flags and you say to yourself, oh, it doesn't matter, give it time. And you sort of ignore what you feel. And then XYZ happens, right?
Yes. And this is where that attachment history comes in. How did you learn to ignore what you feel? Right? How did you learn to move away from this part of yourself? What has happened in the past, or what would happen if you honored this place, if you really tuned into it, really spoke up about it? What is the worst thing? What is your fear, your greatest fear that could happen right in this place? Right. I mean,
and then there you go, right? You can see it doesn't sound very different from the EFT that we've been doing, right?
Yeah,
it really is about tracking.
Yes, it really is the same thing. It's just, instead of tracking necessarily like, their cycle with another person, it can be there's how they interact with themselves and emotions, and how this does play out interpersonally, not only within relationships, but in between relationships, right? So
right,
really,
so you widen the rings, the context, right? So you widen it. You start with how it starts with the person, and then how it plays out into, you kind of widen the rings in terms of relationships.
And
the thing I found
this cycle a common pattern with friendships? Is it common among romantic partners? Is it same or is it different?
Yes, and the thing that the thing you just said now that struck me, and I think it's kind of gone out of my head, but I think the thing that really comes alive for me is at least personally, in sort of embracing EFIT, what I've found hardest isn't tracking the inner cycle or the between cycles, because I think we're doing it with couples the whole time. We're tracking what people say to themselves, the intrapsychic cycle. We're tracking how it plays out. We're tracking the elements of emotion, what triggers them, what the meaning we make. The thing I have found hardest is move 3 when it comes to EFIT, and basically the encounters you can shape. And to remember to shape the encounters, because just because no one is in the room, or just you and them are in the room, that's still to process the encounter with you, or the therapist, because first and foremost, you're the first person they're encountering that emotion with and sharing it with, to still process that encounter and to still listen for the interpersonal. Like if someone is talking about someone and there's a protest or a complaint or something, shape that encounter. Set up that imaginary encounter, right? Just because no one is in the room doesn't mean we don't keep having enactments.
Right, because this is still part of the process, is how they do emotion, and we want to help them be able to do emotion. And I've had so many EFT therapists that I supervise who are working with individuals, and the individuals trying to figure out their pattern. Why do I keep finding partners like this? And they keep getting stuck. And one of the places, a common place that I find them getting stuck, is around move 3, because they end up staying very cognitive. And it's like, well, how do they do emotions? There's information there that of course we're not getting at, because we're not inviting them to feel and deeply experience their feelings. And if they want to move away, again, that's part of the process. Now we have a here and now process we can deal with around how do you feel emotions? How do you feel about feeling your emotions? I notice when this gets really tough, you kind of move away and go back into your head. Exactly the same if we encountered a block with a couple, right? And we're trying to get them to feel their emotion with their partner. It's, how do we get you to feel this emotion? Because there's a lot of information that we can't get access to that's essential for healing. I kind of say a metaphor that I use for this, I often ask my clients, and I don't even like video games, but if they've ever played a video game like Super Mario Brothers or something, kind of dating myself, but it's like you have to kind of conquer a level, and the next level, you don't have access to it. You don't know what's inside of it, and you can't go inside of it until you conquer that first level. And so that's why I say it's so important to go to the emotion, because there's information there that it's not unlocked to us till we go to that level. So,
and when you go to that level, right, what really, if you follow our model, right, what really creates that corrective emotional experience is being able to access it and to share it, right? Even if the other is not in the room.
Yeah.
That's
Even
it.
if
That's
you're
the ARE. That's the goal, right? That's the goal.
Yeah.
So really getting a person to be able to say, I'm so ashamed, or I'm so angry, or I can't, really just close up to the action, helping the person say to the person directly in imagination what they're saying to you in the room.
Yeah.
And the shift that happens when you shape that encounter. So it's not just telling about the emotion, it's now sharing it directly. That is when the emotion really comes alive in the room. And isn't that what we're trying to do? We're trying to bring it fully alive in the room. Yes.
And again, shape how they do emotions. And sometimes we're the first person that they've really done emotions, or who's ever been there for them in this place. And so, coming to that process, what is it like to share this with me, to have me witness your pain? What do you see on my face? Do you sense acceptance? Do you, helping them to kind of ground in that? But sometimes, again, they may kick it back another block, just like we'll encounter with couples. Oh, well, it's because I'm paying you. And so that's why you're so even now it's so hard to trust that I could really accept you and really be here in this place with you, not judge you. And, that the only reason I'm not judging you is because you pay me, right? It's so hard to believe that I can be here in your humanity with you.
Anabelle, you had really one great question. You said, what if a client has a hard time coming to acceptance that it's over?
Yeah. I have that come up a lot, right? Clients who are like, well, I'm going to try to win them back, or, it's not really done, or, that's where they get stuck, right? Is that relationship is really over. And so how do we help clients work towards acceptance?
Right. And I was trying to think about that question, and I was trying to think, right, like to accept that it's over when every cell in your body is still longing for that connection, screaming for that connection, right? And since we're not fixers, since we're not trying to find a solution, and since we're just trying to be with people right where they are, right? It's kind of really helping that person out. I can't accept it. Some part of me just won't let go. I can't let you go. And just tolerating and accepting, that's where the person is. You're saying to me, Anabelle, I can't let it go. It's not over. Every cell in my body wants to hold on to you because you matter so much. My heart's broken. I can't let you go.
Yeah.
And just being there and seeing what emerges if you really let a person be where they are.
Yeah. And often I find there's a lot of hidden meaning also in there, right? What is the meaning if that you kind of tell yourself that letting go means, right?
Yeah. Yes. So then you're back into the elements of emotion.
Yes.
Because if you let it go, if you let him or her go, or they go, what will happen? And then we're back to seeing
more shame, right? That I failed in some way or this, and then same process.
And then be with the person in that spiral of, in that spiral, be with them. And so if you look at it from that perspective, EFIT is not so different from what we've been doing.
Yeah.
Right? It's
Yeah.
still really going into the furnace with people, feeling the heat with them, being with them right where they are. Us tolerating, us being able to tolerate it without trying to fix it, change it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I constantly tell my clients. It's not a grief event, right? It's a grief process, right? It takes place over time. And, you know, so we can't really fix it, you know, it's how to help them be in it and cope with it in a healthy way and tolerate those emotions.
And what I'm learning more and more to do, because of my own personal experience, like we said, either you kind of get anxious or you kind of maybe shut out relationships completely. But if you really buy into attachment and that we're wired for connection, and then what I'm really trying to do, because it's the healthy thing to actually really connect, is to still prime that longing. Right?
Yeah.
Right now, you can't imagine ever opening up your heart and letting someone in, let someone matter to you again. That would be just too hard, right? So let someone in again, to let yourself trust again. I'm validating right now. That's too hard to imagine, but I'm still painting that picture of the possibility of one day and seeding it, right? Because that's the healthy thing. The healthy thing is to get back to a place where you can allow your heart to open up again and connect. But the beauty of seeding is you validate where the person is now while still painting a picture of what could be possible if they weren't deploying their current strategy. Of, say, shutting down our relationships, or still trying to get hold of the relationship that's over, that, you know, not letting go of the relationship.
Right.
So you validate where they are and also paint a picture of what would be possible if they didn't hold on to the current strategy that they have, whatever that strategy looks like.
Yes, so beautiful. And for more information on seeding, guys, go back and watch our video on seeding attachment. But in a very quick reference, it's planting a little seed that will water and tend to, that will eventually grow and blossom into healthy, secure attachment once again. So
yes, because that's ultimately would be, you know, what we would hope for, right? That you can grieve, let go, and still open up your heart to let another seed grow in your heart, another seed of love.
Absolutely. Helena, this is so beautiful, and you've said this so beautiful. So for our viewers who are watching that would like to get in touch with you, maybe they're EFT therapists that might like to attend a training or ask you some questions or maybe get mentored by you, do you have a website? How can people find you or follow you?
Yeah, so I have a website, counseling, and the number 4, so counselingforcouples.co.uk. And Sandra Taylor, my co-trainer and my sister here in London, we're going to be running a full day's workshop in the autumn on seeding attachment. I ran a half-day workshop with the Chicago Center on seeding attachment, but we're going to run a full day. So, you know, if you look out on my website, you will see when it's posted.
Perfect. And they could also email you through your website, maybe if they're another EFT community that would like to invite you to do your workshop.
So my email is Helene, Helene Igwebuike, the most difficult surname, Igwebuike @gmail.com. So they can email
and I will put this in the description for the video. So if you're listening to this on podcast, just rewind to get a piece of paper.
Yes.
Excellent.
So, well, do you know, I wanted to say, Anabelle, thank you. It was been very interesting talking to you about this, because I haven't actually looked at EFIT just specifically through the lens of coping with, you know, relationships ending. The loss of attachment. We talk a lot about how to get into attachment and how to build attachment and strengthen it, but how do you let go of someone you don't want to let go of?
I know, right? And it is all about attachment at the end of the day, which again, attachment affects our emotions and our behavior. So I call it the golden trifecta, because they're all inextricably tied. So, I share your love for this beautiful model, and just that it has this ability to get to the heart of the matter and really be with people where they are, unlike any other model, no matter what they're going through, right? As I said in the beginning, there's really not a presenting problem that EFT cannot help with, whether you're an individual or you're a family or you're a couple. It really is a beautiful model to find acceptance and love and really feel your humanity touched again.
Oh, beautifully put. Thank you.
And Helena, is there a website for the British Center for EFT?
Yes, beftcenter.org. BEFT Center. And center as in the British way, CENTRE.org.
Okay, good. Thank you for clarifying that, because if they spelled it the American way, they'd be out of luck.
Yes.
Excellent. Yes. So if you're watching this, I will make sure that I put a link to all of Helene's web addresses for you to find online, as well as information for ICEFT. And if you're listening via podcast, you can just hit the rewind button, catch yourself a piece of note paper, or take it down on your phone. Don't miss out. And as I mentioned, Helena and I also did a previous EFT talk about seating attachment. So if you haven't gotten a chance to check it out, it is excellent. Helena is just truly amazing. And there's a video of her on YouTube as well, somewhere, of her doing the EFT hand dance. And it's really quite beautiful. She does a beautiful interpretation of it, gives it a lot more spice and culture to it, which is amazing. So make sure you catch her. And thank you again so much, Helena, for being with us and just sharing your wisdom and your expertise in the model of EFT.
Well, I was saying to you, as you know, I didn't feel I was an expert on breakups, but here you go. This was our exploration together, Anabelle. This is yes.
Absolutely, absolutely. So thank you so much. And thank you to our viewers for continuing to watch and making EFT Talk a success. I hope that you hit subscribe, because more episodes are on the way.
Don't forget to buy my book, Using Relentless Empathy in the Therapeutic Relationship, Connecting with Challenging and Resistant Clients for Helping Professionals. Available on Amazon or on my website, www.drbugatti.com.